welcome to the Level Up Podcast, Oakleaf's video game half hour. I am here with today's co-hosts,
Jet Williams
and Albert Gregory.
And today we're going to be talking about something I've dubbed gaming fetishes. What these are, is not as lewd as it sounds. They are specific mechanics in video games that you don't see too often, but when you spot them, it gets you really excited, pretty much. For example, one of my favorite things to see is destructible environments. Things that are allowed to be destroyed, but don't have to be. So it's not scripted. It's not like the big Call of Duty set pieces where everything's blowing up around you, but it's like, you can smash a window or, break some floorboards. The more, the merrier.
That's what I really loved about the Battlefield multiplayer system, is that it had those kind of set pieces, but they weren't shoehorned in like a Call of Duty game. Like everything happened naturally in the flow of the game, and stuff would get blown up, but it was never planned. It was all players blowing stuff up to give themselves an advantage. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, who doesn't love blowing shit up?
True.
Can I swear on this podcast? I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're fucking allowed to swear. Come on. Jet, what's something you look for?
Oh man, probably the biggest thing that I think makes or breaks games that have it is good driving mechanics. Like any game that includes vehicles, when a large part of the game is based around vehicles, can be made, or driving is a very important part of the game. So you take like comparing GTA 4 and GTA 5, like they're pretty similar games as far as plot line. The story isn't that gripping. The shooting's pretty good, but it's nothing special for a third-person game. But what really set them apart, besides the vast graphical differences, obviously, is that GTA 4, the cars drove like boats. And they literally drove like boats. If you turned, they would swing over to the side. You couldn't do anything fast. And the races in that game, they were meant to be competitive, but they always just turned into a total shit show because none of the cars would handle correctly. So you just have a bunch of people stacking up around corners. But GTA 5, I think they really took the time and the effort to make it like a driving-based game. All the vehicles in that game handled somewhat realistically, but still arcadey enough to be like really fast and really fun. And if you look at the stuff they're putting out now as far as DLC, it's basically just a driving game. Like they still put out heists, but the main amount of content comes from their races and their like featured series and stuff. So
did you ever play the Dirt video games?
Oh yeah, I did.
I always really liked those, like especially for like rally car racing. But have you played the most recent one where you're like, as far as I know, there's no way to get out of the car. You're like in the car. What I don't call that.
Is it Dirt 4 or Dirt Rally?
Dirt Rally.
Yeah. My dad has that. He bought it for Christmas because he's really into simulations. He has a wheel and everything set up in front of his TV.
What do you think, like mechanics of that? Something.
Oh, it's hard. It's totally realistic, and it's like hyper realistic to the point of like Gran Turismo style simulation games.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance to be struck between like realism and like actually fun to play, because I think that's a big thing. Is like GTA 4 in some ways had more realistic driving in a sense, but it was not fun because like I remember if you smash into a telephone pole, you'd fly out to the windshield. And GTA 5 does that, but like 1/10 as often.
Yeah,
like,
your guy usually remembers to put on the seatbelt.
Yeah. So I think that's like a big thing, and that's like really for any mechanic in a realistic feeling game, is there is like a perfect balance you need to find between perfectly realistic and like actually fun. Because like if a Call of Duty game you died pretty much by any bullet shot, which is pretty realistic, it wouldn't be very fun to play. Albert, what's something you like to see in video games?
Well, first of all, I didn't know I was on the podcast about fetishes. I wish I was warned before coming into this.
Specifically video game fetishes. Don't go down that road.
So I don't play nearly as many video games as you two, but one thing that I've noticed I liked recently in the new 2K games, and I've liked this in older games, it doesn't have to be a sports game. It can be like almost any video game, but when your player can almost interact with anything. So like the 2K games recently, I've noticed like you can interact with like the smallest things. In like the gym, you can go up and pretend and get like a drink from the water fountain and stuff like that. It's definitely not as fun as driving or smashing things to bits, but it's just something that like always makes me happy.
It gives that extra level of immersion when you're like, hey, I'm a real person in this video game, so my real person character would probably need to go get some water at some point.
And I've always been a fan of those Sims video games. I haven't played one in a while, but I always liked those like that kind of type of video game. And I feel like this new version of 2K, which some of it bothers me, but you actually like live in a city instead of like just choosing from a menu. You actually have to like walk around and go to the barbershop and all that stuff.
You have to like manage your brand and kind of as a basketball player.
Kind of like you have an agent who's like calling you and stuff. So like that stuff annoys me. I hate that I have to like walk from the gym to my agent when I could have just like pressed a button in the old games. But I do like how like accurate they get with all of this little minute stuff.
Yeah, one game that I've actually never played any of these, but the Yakuza games they're a Japanese series that's pretty much like the Japanese version of GTA. Essentially, is you're this gang member and you kind of just wander around Tokyo or some other cities.
Played it once.
Yeah, and they're like the king of minigames, and this is the thing you see a lot. There's also the Shenmue series, which does that a lot, which is a very similar game that there's a lot less of. But there's just fucking shit to do everywhere, and it's like 90% of the game is not even the game. It's just like you can walk into an arcade, and every single game in the arcade is playable, and they're all different games. And there's like gotcha ball systems where you can like collect little balls of toys that are in balls and like make these collections, and like all of it's bullshit. Like each individual part of the game is essentially like a Facebook game, but all put into like this larger game with with like action,
big like sandbox arcade kind of thing.
Which it's like I say it's bullshit, but I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just like it's all world building. It's all like stuff to make it all feel grounded.
None of it means anything to the plot line or the bigger aspects of the story.
But it just makes it feel complete. It's the kind of walls that the game is held within.
And I don't think this game did it as much, but that's something I always liked in the Hitman games, that you can like interact with a lot more things than you realize.
Yeah, there's always little things to touch and play with.
This is getting weird.
We're getting into fetishes too much. All right, moving on. But along those same lines, though, one of my big things that I like is like emergent gameplay and emergent storytelling, which kind of go hand in hand. Not every game that does one does the other, but a lot of times that's the case. And essentially what like emergent gameplay is the concept of things that you can do in a game that you're not really meant to do. Like it's not meant to be what the game is done, but because of the engine and the tools they give you, you can just fuck around. Like you could do that a lot in what's that game called? Something Wildlands. Ghost Recon?
Ghost Recon, yeah.
I think that's the one where you can like attach. Isn't that the one where you can attach like rockets to stuff and like?
Oh, you're thinking of Just Cause.
Just Cause. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
The third
Just Cause is like that where they just give you essentially they give you all these tools. They put you in a sandbox world and then it's like fucking do whatever you want pretty much. And there's objectives, very like Ubisoft world completion objectives,
map games,
but you don't really have to do any of that shit. You can just fuck around, and like GTA has some of it, not to quite as much of an extent, because a lot of it's still like built into the game. So like the wanted system, like going out and killing hookers might seem like emergent gameplay because it's not really something you have to do, but there's still a wanted system. So that still creates real gameplay where the police chase you because you did something illegal.
And there's a whole mini game aspect out of trying to get 5 stars, doing the most awful shit you can, and then seeing how long you can survive getting chased by SWAT teams.
So that's all like built into the game. But then you take a game like Breath of the Wild, which did it really well, where you can like knock over a tree, freeze it with the stasis spell so it can't move, build up momentum on it, and then ride it like a surfboard across the entire map. And like that is not something I don't think any developer ever did, because it's not something they thought you could do, because you found a way to have fun by breaking the game. Essentially, it's emergent gameplay. And then along those same lines, emergent storytelling is something you see in almost any open world RPG that's worth its weight, like Skyrim or Skyrim. I mean, there's not a lot of examples of these huge, Fallout, pretty much any Bethesda game, I guess, where you can, without any like seams, without breaking anything, you can change the story of the game. You can like tell your own story in your own head and have your own backstory and like what you're doing, and it all works.
It lets you kill whoever you want or do whatever you want, and the game doesn't break. It always keeps going in some way. Yeah, exactly. And like with the exception of like if you didn't want to be the Dragonborn, there's not really a choice there. But like so in Fallout, there's a much better example because you can literally be anything you want in Fallout. There's no pretenses essentially, except that you want to find your son in Fallout 4 or you want to find your killer in Fallout New Vegas. And so that's like a really cool thing, and that's something that a lot of games are trying to do now and kind of failing. Like I feel like they're not giving quite as much freedom as they want, or they're kind of trepidatious about giving the player freedom. But it's something that's really cool when you see it. Yeah.
That's something different than like Fable, where it was almost like the entire game was just making choices to figure out which storyline. But you can't break off that much. It's like two storylines, essentially. Yeah, you're either good or you're evil. And even going middle of the road, like Fable 3, I tried to go middle of the road. I think that was the first Fable game I played. And by the end, it's still like a 1 point. Like if you're 1 point into the good or 1 point into the bad, that's the story you get, period. So when you did that, did you just like, today, this mission he's evil, next mission he's nice. Pretty much. He's evil, next mission he's nice.
I find in pretty much any game, like the Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas karma system, like if if you're just a normal person and you use logic and critical thinking, you're pretty much going to be middle of the road. Because it's like, you know, you might have a situation where you, I don't know, like can either help a dog or not help a dog. And it's like, I'll help the dog. It doesn't cost me anything. But then you might have a system where a guy's like, hey, can I have 500 caps for no reason?
like, no.
And it's like, no, I want my money. It's like, I want to keep my money. And I guess I'm evil for that. But it's like, so it's like, if you just kind of think logically, you tend not to go down either path.
It's the illusion of control, really. Like in video games, every locked door is a key and every poison is an antidote. And no matter how much the game tries to make you feel like you're living this real experience, you know it's still a game.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really makes emergent gameplay and emergent storylines so important, is that they kind of make it feel like it's not they make it feel like it's a more organic experience.
Yeah.
And it's not something totally rigid where you have two options, either or. You know, you can kind of go off and do your own thing and it still works.
Yeah, that's why I like a lot of like games with really, so it kind of all ties back to the breakable environments, things like this, like games with a lot of physics puzzles and like I don't know, systems that are created logically rather than from a good gameplay mechanic perspective. So like Breath of the Wild, for instance, there are a lot of times playing Breath of the Wild that you die and you're pissed because it was not your fault at all. Like a boulder came out of nowhere and killed you because like a weather event happened while you were fighting something. Like there's all these systems that are all happening separately, like in the real world, and sometimes they all come together for something really cool or something really terrible or something really funny, and that like it just feels so real. And I don't get, like, I don't hold a grudge against a game that kills me in an unfair way if it feels realistic. It feels realistically unfair.
Systems interacting apart from the player, like when you're playing Far Cry and you're about to shoot some guy and then a tiger jumps out of the woods and eats him for you, and you're like, oh, that was awesome. Yeah, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
That's one thing I really, really like in video games, is the lack of bullshit. And that's both in multiplayer and in single player games. In multiplayer games, it kind of leans towards kills that have nothing to do with your own skill level. So, you know, like in Black Ops 2, there's a perk or a kill streak you could get. If you get a ton of kills, you get to call in this thing called the swarm. And it's basically a swarm of drones flying around in a circle over the map. There's like 40 or 50 of them, and there's nothing you can do. You can't shoot them down. The only way to avoid them is to go inside and wait inside, and even then they can still kill you from the door, but they just drop down and blow you up, you know? And it's just totally cheap, no way to avoid it other than like hiding out in some covered corner of the map, and that just feels like, you know, there's nothing you can do against it. Or at least in older games, they had dogs that you could call in, like hunting dogs, and if you were good enough, you could stay in a corner and like pick off the dogs as they were coming towards you. But I just feel like that's a big part of what makes multiplayer games irritating to play over time, is when you get killed by those situations where you don't have a choice.
Yeah, and then there was also, I forgot, I think it was World at War that had the tactical nukes, which was like the original version of that, where it's like everyone's dead, period. It doesn't matter if you're in a building or anything. It's like the cheapest of all of them.
But the thing was that if it took 25 kills consecutively to get, so it's like incredibly rare.
It is hard.
Yeah, and at that point, you've pretty much already won the game anyway. So it's like it's just for fun, right?
Yeah,
it's just
like the
joke
final
at the
thing.
end.
But yeah, that's And then in single player games, it really kind of shows through just strung out bullshit that doesn't need to be there. Like in the first Borderlands game, there were segments where you go through into a base, wipe out a bunch of enemies, kill them all, and then you're like walking through the whole thing killing guys, right? And you get to the end, something happens, and then that's it. Instead of being teleported out or doing something else, you have to walk all the way back through the base that you just came through, looking at all the dead bodies, looking at all the stuff that you already looted, and there's no point to it. It's just a waste of time, you know? And it's just trimming the fat from games. Yeah,
that's why I feel like Borderlands 2 kind of perfected the formula. Like it had a really good system of like some spaces you would just move straight through, like a hallway, you know, like you just move through a base, then you'd go to the next base and there'd be no big deal. Or they would have some sort of system where something would happen, where things would respawn, or a new type of enemy.
Or like a teleporter or something at the end, then anything like that.
I feel like Borderlands, the pre-sequel, went the other way and kind of did a lot of the same bullshit that Borderlands 1 did, and it messed with. I think that Borderlands 2 kind of perfected their formula, and then they tried to change it, which again brings me back to my whole sequel thing, which I still want to do a whole episode about sequels, because there's a lot of interesting things that companies do.
Yeah, like in Uncharted 3. Did you ever play any of the Uncharted games? Either you guys?
I own them all, but I haven't played them.
Oh, really?
It's basically just I'm drawing a blank. Harrison Ford.
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, it's Indiana Jones, a video game. But,
Or male
Tomb Raider.
Exactly. But there's whole stretches in that game where they could have had a short cutscene or even had a character say something that would move the plot along, but instead they have like 10-minute sequences where you're just walking and you're not shooting anything. There's like a lot of like cringeworthy banter going on between the characters, and you're not doing it. You're just holding your stick forward, walking forward, and it's just stuff like that. You know, it doesn't need to be in the game. Like they're trying to have a cinematic experience, but just go for a cutscene. You know.
And then there's the absolute fucking bonkers thing that companies do with your walk speed is different from the mandatory walking scenes. Like Ubisoft loves to fucking do that. And it's like, why? What?
You have to like sprint
the
then
point?
walk.
Yeah, I always remember that like Red Dead Redemption and stuff like that.
They're trying to keep up.
Well, at least
every game does it. None of them like. I think GTA 5 actually allows you, if you get close enough to a guy, you'll like
They
auto
kind of
walk.
like sync up.
You'll like auto walk with them. And that's
Red
fine.
Dead, I think you can hold a button on your horse where you walk the same speed as him.
Yeah,
but
you're
if you're
running
walking on the
alongside.
ground, then I think that you're just like you're running. You're sprinting, and they're like way back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's wild.
In Battlefield 3, the story missions for that game actually had a thing where you'd be like, okay, the objective's this door, so you have to get through that door. So you sprint ahead of your guys to get to the door, and you're like, all right, I'm here. Where's my guys? And then they come around the corner and they walk towards you, and they like physically like push you out of the way by walking into you, and you just get like shunted back. And then they're like, okay, we're here. Let's open the door. It's like I've been here
bro, I was here
for
first.
2 minutes. Yeah, I want to open the door.
I got the position.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think honestly, like game companies need to cut their ties with like having NPCs that accompany you all the time. Like, just like let me be alone. Let me do shit alone. Like I've played very little of what's the newest Deus Ex game? Mankind something.
Mankind Divided.
Is that it? I thought there was a newer one.
I thought that was it.
I've only played like 2 levels of that one because it was free on PS4. But like, it wasn't my favorite game, but it did have that like sort of lone wolf. Like I feel like I'm like really badass, like Hitman, same kind of thing. It's like you're just this one guy killing all these people, doing all this stealth shit, and you feel badass. And like that feels better to me than any game where I've been forced to be with a squad of guys. Like there's never a situation where I feel cool and I'm with a bunch of other guys.
A lot of that comes down to AI design. And trying to figure out, like they tried to incorporate in Battlefield 4 where you could direct your teammates to like, hey, go over here, shoot these guys, or cover me, or stuff like that. But it was never fleshed
And then
out.
then it's a whole different type of game essentially. Like you're trying to be two kinds of games at once, and it's just weird always. That's why I never like. I've heard that the I keep blanking on names today. There's a series of tactical games where you're like it's like top down and you're controlling these squads and like moving them around. They're really popular.
RTS.
It's like an RTS, but it's not. It's like you have like
Smaller
five people you're controlling at once, and that's it.
Like XCOM.
XCOM, yeah, that's what I was thinking. The XCOM series, yeah. So like the XCOM games, I've heard like amazing things about the XCOM series, but I can't like get into that, like the nitty gritty, like, and it's supposed to be really punishing too, where like if a squad member dies, he's just dead, and you have to recruit a whole new guy, and it's like it just seems way too punishing to be enjoyable for me, but. It's like that kind of game, and you try to like mix that into a shooter, and it just doesn't work out.
And that kind of game too. I mean, it's skill based. Sure, there's a lot of skill there, but as far as aiming goes, you put the guys in position. They line up the enemy, and then it gives a percentage, and it's like what percentage it is that they might hit him or they might not. Yeah. And I've seen videos where it's like 95% guy shoots and misses. So it just seems like, you know, if I was playing that, I'd be fucking pissed.
Yeah, it's annoying. Do you have another mechanic?
What about you, Albert?
You guys haven't even done your second yes, and you guys.
I did too.
I did too.
Did you too? What was your second one?
Driving and bullshit.
Bullshit.
Okay, I guess.
Bullshit's a pretty wide category. There's a lot of bullshit in video games.
Maybe the lack of bullshit would be the thing.
Yeah.
I just keep going back to NBA 2K because that's what I've been playing so much lately. And I don't really have something I like as much as just hearing you guys talk about like the annoying things in cutscenes.
Let's move to anti-fetishes. What's your wet blanket thing in video games?
My nitpick.
Yeah.
What nit am I gonna pick?
Pick some nits, dude.
Yeah, let's pick some nits. I really just going about cutscenes. I don't know why there's cutscenes in sports games at all.
Yeah.
It seems really pointless to me. I'm just trying to play a basketball game, and recently I've been playing 2K, and I sit there for 15 minutes watching a dumb movie.
Are they even skippable?
No.
Oh shit! That's
the recent
for me.
2K
That's a nit
games.
worth picking.
Yeah. It really it's really
Unskippable
annoying.
cutscenes.
Unskippable cutscenes. Yeah.
The really annoying thing with those two is like I like to watch cool, like good, well-made cutscenes. Like they're sometimes
Mass
cool.
Effect.
But then when you have a game that's like has a lot of replay value, and then there's cutscenes, so you're replaying the game the second time, and you're like, I know all this shit, I just want to get through it. That's when it's like extremely annoying, and you're just trying to go through it all. But again, going back to the things I like, I do like really well made, well executed in-engine, I think, cutscenes I like a lot, where it doesn't look like a fucking fully produced animated movie separate from the game, where it's actually made within the engine of the game, which are really cool.
Yeah, and that's actually one thing about the 2K stuff is it's not like a separate movie. It's not like trying to be super cinematic, which is nice. But there's also, I mean, one thing I want to mention, if you ever watching the 2K cutscenes, there's this character that's like your best friend in the show, this Asian girl that was with you, and it's like the most racist character you've ever seen on anything. It's really weird.
That's weird.
But just comparing the two basketball games I've been playing, NBA Live has this thing, instead of cutscenes, they give you like a phone and all you're doing is answering texts. And nowadays I feel like that so many people are used to that. I feel like that's a way better system. In a sports game especially. Like, it's one thing if it's like Uncharted, which they should at least just have the cutscene, not have you hold the stick the whole time. Yeah. But the cutscenes at least makes more sense to me in a game like that. It's supposed to be more like cinematic.
I'm trying to remember the game. I fucking keep blanking on names. It was this game that came out last year that was like this sci-fi. It had to do with time, like time manipulation, and it had this like star-studded cast of like real actors who played all the characters.
Oh shit! And it was all motion captured.
Yeah.
I remember hearing
was
about
that
that.
called? Okay.
Quantum something.
Quantum Break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was in it?
It was the guy from Stuff. It was.
I shouldn't ask you because you know no names. Obviously.
I know absolutely none.
That's what we've learned today. Who made you the host?
It was
I don't know.
It was one of the main guys from Fringe, which you still haven't watched, so you wouldn't know. But the point is, like, a lot of people had these complaints because part of the game was literally you had to create a separate account on this website, and when you would get to a point in the game where the game would stop and they would say, "Go watch this," and you would go and watch a 30-minute full-length feature episode of a show that had to do with the game, and then it had to be registered on your account that you watched all 30 minutes before you could play the game. It was ridiculous. I have no idea why they did it.
That's
it was
crazy.
like just literally like a complete stop to the action.
This is kind of weird, and I don't know how much it's going to relate. You can definitely edit this out if you want, Devin. But have you heard of that new game or that new show, Mosaic?
No.
So it started out, it's Steven Soderbergh who made like Aaron Brockovich and The Nick and like all these good shows and movies. And it started, the like purpose of it was to start as an app, like a game that you play on an app with like no, I can't remember the names of people. What's her name from like Basic Instinct?
I'm not sure. Sorry.
It'll on your eventually. People, if anyone ever listens to this, they'll know what I'm talking about. But like stars her and like the guy who plays Pee Wee Herman and like all these other different actors, but it was just a game on an app originally, kind of like in the mold of these like true crime series that are become really popular, where on the app you're trying, like, you watch these little scenes of just like a different, it's all from like someone's different perspective, and you were supposed to like put together like who murders.
It's called Mosaic.
It's called Mosaic, and
is it like a movie or a TV
now
show?
it's a show on HBO that they just like dumped like all in one night. It's like 5 episodes. And I tried watching one of the episodes, seeing it was like Soderbergh and her, and then I heard about this whole app. I don't know. It's just it's like almost a whole game about cutscenes.
Weird.
It's really
I heard
weird.
about a movie that they were putting out where it's like an interactive game movie where it's all live action film, but it's you make choices about what's going on. It's all shot in first person, and it's like this like noir like crime drama.
Oh my god!
How could you, Albert?
A lot of game companies are trying to do these like multimedia experience things, and I think it's cool. I think there's something there that can be done. They just need to find like a good balance. Like, there's a lot of really interesting mobile games coming out. Like, there was one, I forgot the name. I'm just gonna say that right out. So if you want to play it, you're
It's a mobile game. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but the whole thing was like it was like a simulated texting like conversation.
Oh,
and
yeah.
all you had was dialogue choices, and it had something to do with this like relationship. I want to say it was you were playing a woman who was talking to her ex about something, and like the whole thing is it's just telling a story. Like, there's no
Through text
gameplay,
messages.
but you're just choosing like what to say and like what changes. There's also a non-mobile game called 3/5 Home that is a very similar thing where you're driving in a car and you're just you get a call from your parents and they're just making sure you're okay because you're in like Oklahoma, I think, and there's a tornado coming, and they've like read about it and they know it's like in her like your area, and so all you're doing is like responding, trying to like reassure your parents, and then like eventually you get to a point where they put on your little brother, and your little brother just tells you this like short story he wrote, and it's just there's no dialogue choice at that point. He's just telling you this story, and it's like this really beautiful story as like slowly you like are approaching the storm in the background. It's like I don't want to like spoil anything near the end. But
So it's like a driving simulator.
yeah, I mean, you're not even really driving because it's a 2D. So you're literally just like, I think you just, what it is like time only moves when your car's moving. So like to pause the game, you just stop holding the A button. But the whole game is just, you're just holding the A button and then occasionally you press a button to like select a dialogue choice. And you're just driving.
Sounds like Desert Bus.
Really interesting.
You heard of Desert Bus? No. It's this really, really shitty old like Flash 2D game where you're first person driving a bus through the desert, and it takes something like 12 hours to beat the game, where you're just going straight, but your bus like curves to the left, so you have to keep tapping the right side to keep it on track, and like there's like slight bends in the road, and that's it. And that's the whole game. It's just like,
Can you pause? Or do you have to
no
play for 12
pausing.
straight
You have to
hours?
play through for 12 hours to
God.
finish the game.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, we got way off track because we're not talking about mechanics anymore.
Maybe I'll bring it back a little bit with this. We kept talking about cutscenes, and one thing that always really bothers me in these cutscenes they're like so-called like interactable. Like they have whole games now, like the Walking Dead game.
Yeah,
it's
Telltale.
essentially
Yeah,
just a
Telltale
giant
series.
cutscene where you're like pressing B or press X at the certain. I can't stand it.
Quick
That's one
time
of my-
events. That's what those are
Is
called.
it- It's called.
I think
quick
those
time
are. I think
events.
those are
I can't
cool
stand it.
in the Telltale series. I think
In the
they're,
Telltale
they're
series,
interesting.
it's okay because it's like that's the whole game.
I think
you know.
I was incredibly angry when I finally got. So I played Shadow of Mordor. That was the first one. Yeah, Shadow of Mordor. Like twice I played once and got pretty far into it. Played a second time from the start, got a little into it, gave up. And then I played it a third time, started because it was like a long time later. So I started over from the start, played through the whole thing, got really into it. Like I fucking liked it this third time for some reason. Got all the way to the end, and the final boss is a quick time event. And that's so common. It's so
sucks.
common for some reason in
So,
action
like,
games.
not even a
where, like,
challenge.
literally the developers don't know how to make the game harder because that's the problem is they make the game too hard leading up to the final boss and like, fuck, how do we make the final boss harder? We've done everything we can. Make it a quick time event.
Press the fucking button a bunch of times.
That's all
Skill,
it fucking is. And
skill.
It's so annoying.
Yeah.
I think that maybe God of War was the only one who did it like okay because it was like combat and then like the finisher was a quick time event, which I was okay with. And again, I played that one as a kid. I haven't played it in years, so I don't know. Maybe now it would bother me more than it did then. But I feel like they had a good balance of one and the other.
That's something that really pissed me off in the Uncharted games because I was trying, for some of the cutscenes, I was trying to watch it like it was a movie and like chill with some like ice cream or something.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like, 10-minute cutscene.
Yeah.
And then it's like press A and I'm gonna have like a fucking bowl of ice cream in my hand. I have to, and my guy dies and it starts over
That's
at
exactly
the
how I
beginning
felt.
of the cutscene.
I had a bowl of something else, but exactly how I felt.
And that's another thing that I was going to talk about is shitty saves. Like just, Fallout and Skyrim, most
Yeah,
Bethesda
the
games are really good
default.
about that because they have the F5 quick save. So if anything
Yeah.
ever happens that you don't want to not happen, you can just hit quick save. It'll do it. It's really easy.
On console, which I played Skyrim originally on console, and I played Fallout 5 or 4. Not Fallout 5. I don't have exclusive access to Fallout 5.
What?
Breaking news.
Fallout 4 I played on
that
console, and with the default settings, it's really shitty because it auto saves every 5 minutes when you go to your Pip-Boy. So if you don't go to your Pip-Boy for 45 minutes, you don't save for 45 minutes. Period. If you don't go through a door and you don't rest and you don't sleep and you don't go to your Pip-Boy, which is
be, like,
like that's
halfway
very
across the map.
it's very easy when you're traveling to forget to do all those things and you're fucked. So I always set it to like the minimum, like every minute I like just save, like keep saving.
No, I was revisiting.
Generally, they're good about it.
I was revisiting Bad Company 2 last night. It's a 2010 game. And the biggest standout for that game, because always Battlefield games before that had been the single player was basically just on a map with AI. But in this game, it was really narrative driven and actually like pretty funny. But there's this really rage-inducing segment where you're sitting on the back of a truck with a grenade launcher. Guys are coming at you in cars, and then at the end there's this helicopter. And that helicopter dips really close down in front of you, and you're supposed to shoot it, right? And I probably played through it about 7 or 8 times because I kept going through. The first time I was totally into it, I was having a good time. And then I shoot the helicopter, and the splash damage from the grenade kills me. So I'm like, okay, I guess I still shot the helicopter, so it should still be done. It started playing the cutscene, cut out about halfway through and put me back at the beginning, and I had to play it again. And then as I kept going through it, I started like losing focus, getting killed during the mission instead of at the end. And it took me 7 tries to get through it because it's like a 5-minute sequence and it starts you at the beginning every single time, And maybe it's just a hallmark of older games that they haven't really figured out good saves in the middle of events. But
I think that the games that have perfected it have almost all in-game representations of respawning. So Dark Souls, obviously, BioShock, and Borderlands all have physical in-game things that are respawning you, and they almost always work the best
right.
because there is no reset. You're not going back in time at all. You're just continuing forward. You die, you go back, but it's all like in one motion.
The only issue with that is that then you kind of miss the ability to have some of those crazy like one-time events where, you know, like if you were in a BioShock game, there's never really any way for you to have that kind of experience shooting out the back and you know you're going to die at any second because there's no respawn that can support that.
That's true, yeah. There's a lot of
It's a give and take. And yeah, I agree that like in-game saves, like in Resident Evil with the typewriters, you know?
Yeah, those all are cool. But that's about all the time we have for
Do you
this
want
week's
to
episode.
maybe, since maybe some listeners on this podcast would like to also listen to another podcast, you want to preview
As,
Altered?
Yeah, what other podcasts do we have coming up?
well, we have Albert is doing his. Is it still Chin Music? No, Little Punchy.
Little
podcast.
Punchy podcast with me and Will Mathis. We're going to talk about
Punchy?
Big Brother. Yeah, because we like to be a little punchy. And
Get a little saucy.
yeah, I mean, it's just like the style. I'm not saying we're on anything of any sort. We would never say that.
Oh.
But
You just do it. You insane.
yeah, of course not. But yes, we have that. If you're like into reality TV, we're talking about Celebrity Big Brother right now. We'll talk about the regular Big Brother during the summer. Maybe some like Amazing Race, mixing some stuff like that. But you and I, Devin, are planning on starting a podcast where we're going to be talking about the show Altered Carbon that came out on Netflix recently.
We're going to start with that. The kind of format we have right now is we're going to be binging shows, just watching them as quick as we can and talking about them, and then just moving on to the next show and trying to cover as many as we can in as short a time as possible. So we're going to be talking probably about some big series like Breaking Bad and Westworld and Game of Thrones and as many as we can fit in.
Ooh, Westworld.
Just
Hopefully shorter shows. Yeah, Westworld probably makes more sense than Game of
good
Thrones.
one.
Just 'cause-
Basically, you're figuring out how to make a 30-minute podcast take up as much time outside of the podcast as possible.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, I feel like anyone's a fan of this podcast, they would like a podcast about Altered Carbon. And I promise I'll talk a lot more because I'll know more about it than video games. So yeah, if you like
Also,
this, look into that.
another podcast you can listen to Albert on is me, him, and our friend Julia are going to revive my old Furious 15 podcast. It's a 15-minute podcast where I rant about stuff that is pissing me off, and then I introduce some guests and we answer questions. We talk about the sort of issue or concept or social structure, whatever it is that's angering me that week. So yeah, join us in those podcasts and join us hopefully in 2 weeks. I know this was a late podcast. Hopefully we'll have another one in 2 weeks. And we'll see you then. Thank you.